Hello everyone, my name is Amina Allen and I am a student who attends Georgia State University. I have created this website to talk about racial bias in the American criminal justice system and talk about how African Americans and people of color are discriminated against in the legal system. Above is a video I posted. It is a Senate confirmation and it's a conversation between Senator Cory and Trump nominee Michael Brennan. Michael Brennan is a lawyer who was nominated by Donald Trump, our current president, to be a part of the 7th U.S. Court of Appeals. So he is trying to become a judge, a part of one of the courts. And the reaction to this video is very appalling because Michael Brennan was asked by Senator Cory Booker 5 times, do you think there's racial bias in the American criminal justice system? And every time Michael Brennan is asked the question, he doesn't give a exact yes or no. He stalls and talks about things that he can do to make sure, but he doesn't exactly answer the question. So, and towards the end of the confirmation, towards the end of the interview between Senator Cory Booker and Michael Brennan admits to not knowing anything about racial issues, and he's trying to become a judge, a part of a U.S. court. But he doesn't know anything about racial issues or statistics about African Americans and people of color and their sentences or anything like that. So it connects back to what I put in my argument summaries. I put an interview in there between Shane Smith and former President Barack Obama. And Shane Smith asked Barack Obama, do you think the American justice system is racist? And Barack Obama answers by saying he does think there is a clear bias between African Americans and whites. And he lists certain statistics how an African American student is more likely to be suspended than a white student. And he talks about how African Americans are more likely to be stopped by police officers than a white person would be. And he ends the interview by saying that the justice system is like this because we have become numb to the fact of African Americans being targeted. We look at it as being normal. And I've realized that I totally agree with what President Barack Obama was saying because it is true. 50 years ago, it was normal for an African American to be discriminated against and not looked at as the same as a white person. But that should not be the norm today, 50 years later. And it goes to show that these higher officials and these people that work with the American justice system and these judges, prosecutors, lawyers, juries, even people in the community, we are so used to African Americans being targeted that we do not look at it as a problem. And these officials do not look at it as a problem. They don't look to think, let's look at the statistics. Let's see what the problem is. And I think that it's shocking that this man, Michael Brennan, a Trump nominee, our president has nominated someone that does not know anything about racial issues, but these are the people that we put our trust into. And I think it's absurd that these judicial officials and people who work in the criminal justice system cannot even answer a simple question as to say yes or no, there is a racial bias in the legal system. Because when you look at the facts, when you look at the statistics, and you hear things like African Americans are sentenced 5 times higher for the same crimes that a white person commit, that is a clear bias. That is a clear warning. That is a clear red flag. And I feel that these judicial officials and even people in the community, everybody sees it. They know it. They're aware, but they do not want to admit to it. It's the fact that African Americans and people of color are not a part of the majority group in America. They are minorities. And I feel that America and the government and people, higher authorities, all believe in keeping the majority together. Minorities are always looked at as being weak or not looked at as being the same as a majority group because we're smaller. And that is not the case. All groups of people should be treated equally. And I feel that there's a theory that they like to keep the majority in and keep the minorities out. And they use the American legal system to do that. They pull over African Americans more to try to catch them. African Americans and people of color are racially profiled to try to that is why they are racially profiled, so they could try to get locked up. They have death penalties more than a white person because the American system does not want them here. And I feel that everybody knows that there is a bias in the justice system. But going back to what former President Barack Obama said, we are so used to it, it's so normal, they don't see it as a problem. Personally, it's very hard for me to relate to judicial officials and people who work in the American criminal justice system say, we're doing this to protect our country. We're doing this to keep the bad people out. And I don't believe that. Because why is it that African Americans and people of color are the only ones that are really being targeted as bad people? Like in my research probe where I posted about the mass shootings and the fact that 90% of them are white, why is that not being targeted? Why is that not a red flag? Why is it a red flag when African Americans have the most drug charges and that's the worst thing that's happening in America when it's not? And it's difficult because I realize that anybody can go to school to become a judge, a lawyer. Anybody can do the work to become one of these higher officials, but do they have the right morals? Do they have the right stance? Do they understand the importance? Like Michael Brennan. Here's a nominee that's trying to be on the Court of Appeals, but he doesn't know anything about racial issues. He doesn't find that important. And he says once he becomes a judge, people then start to look into, but no. You look into these things, you learn, you get your knowledge before you become a judge, before you become a police officer, before you become a lawyer. It's like nobody cares until it's too late. And I feel that if everybody came together and spoke up about it, that there could be a change. Because I do believe that everybody knows that there is a racial bias in the criminal justice system, but people do not speak up about it because what's the big deal? And the big deal is there are men and women out here that can't see their families ever again because they have a life sentence for drug charges, a life sentence for robbing a bank. But white people and majority of people in America can get away with murder and only have probation, or can get away with raping a college girl and only receive 6 months of jail time. It's not fair. The justice system is not fair. And I feel that if we don't look at it, if we stop looking at it as normal, and if we stop thinking like, oh, well, that's just how it's always been, and we start to really, really, really get deep into why is this happening? Why do we still think like this? And if everybody came together and really tried to really figure out what is going on and start calling out these officials who do have a racial bias towards African Americans and people of color, there would be a change. And that is what I'm trying to do through my website also, is try to get people to understand the importance and the awareness of actually speaking out and understanding where is this coming from.